Behind me, on that side there, you will have seen a yew tree. The yew tree is the symbol of the town of Rush, because its name in Irish is Rosseo, or the promontory of the yew trees. At one time, all of this area was covered in yew trees. Why, I don't know, but it was. Just behind me here, this wall is the gable end of the original church of St. Maur. This was erected about 700 years ago by a group of French sailors who were lost in a storm, and they were in danger of dying because the waves were so high and the boat was so rocky that they thought they were going to drown. So their patron saint, and the patron saint of drowning people in fact, is called St. Maur. He was a Benedictine monk, and they got down on their knees and they prayed, and they said "Sauvez-nous," which of course is French for save us, and they made a vow, and the vow was that if they were saved from the storm, that they would erect a chapel on the site where they came to land. Now, they had left France heading for England, but they didn't know where they would end up, if anywhere at all. And after 3 days the storm abated, and they came ashore over in Rogerstown estuary, over on this side here. So they came up here to this hill, which is the nearest point to Rogerstown estuary that has solid ground, and they erected a small wooden church on this spot. They of course did not erect this actual wall. This has been done by stonemasons, and sailors are not renowned for their masonry. In Rush there is less frost than anywhere else in Ireland, an average of maybe 2 days a year, and we are the second sunniest place in Ireland after Wexford, and we're also the driest place in Ireland. You wouldn't think so from the weather we've been having recently, but there's less rain in Rush than anywhere else in Ireland, and more sun than anywhere except Wexford. So we have a lot of sun, a lot of sunshine, a lot of rain, not much rain, a lot of sunshine, and a rich, loamy, sandy clay soil, which is the best soil in Ireland. It's in fact the most fertile soil in Ireland, and that's the reason why in Rush we have a horticultural industry, and where most of Ireland's vegetables are grown. So the stones here are limestone. This one here is different, as you can see. It's a nice orangey colour. It's Triassic sandstone, probably brought here in one of the glaciers when it was flowing over Ireland. This part of the church here is the east window, and the altar would have been in this part here. Churches normally are built in an east-west direction, and you will have noticed that the graves also point east to west. There's a reason for this. You may have heard about a book by John McGahan called "That They May Face the Rising Sun." This refers to the fact that when someone is buried, or certainly up until recently anyway, when they were buried with their feet facing east, so that on the last day of the resurrection, when Jesus appeared out of the rising sun, they would come up and they would be able to see him instead of having their back to him, which wouldn't be very polite, of course. So all of the people in this graveyard have their feet facing towards the rising sun, or should have anyway. I'm standing now at the front gate leading to Kanuha House. Kanuha House was one of the most, let's say, important houses in Ireland at one time. It was built in 1826 by a family called Palmer, and it was built in the Palladian style, which means that the front of the house had columns outside it, something like Gracelands. You know Elvis and Gracelands, similar to that, but a slightly more upmarket version of Gracelands. I'm now inside the main gate of the Palmer estate. This beautiful avenue actually leads nowhere now. it leads simply to an estate of houses. At one time it swept all the way into the beautiful Palladian residence of Kanuha House. Now, Kanuha House was not the first house to be built on this spot. The first one was called Rush House, and it belonged to people called Eklins, and the Eklins were an old landed gentry family, and one of the Eklins is supposed to have married a Palmer, and that is how the Palmers came to be involved here. The Palmers were originally from County Mayo, and they had a large house there with columns at the front, these Palladian columns. And when they built Kanuha House in 1826, they removed the columns from the house in Mayo and brought them on horse and cart about 130 miles from Mayo to here, and erected them in front of Kanuha House. Since then, of course, the house has been demolished, and the only part still left now are these columns, which originally were an addition to the house. They were put on the house from another house, so they originally started off life in Mayo. I'm standing now in Kanuha Churchyard in Rush. Kanuha is another version of Rossio, Kanuha, the headland of the yew trees. So Rush actually has two names in Irish. The gravestone my hand is resting on belongs to a man called Jack Connor, who died on the 16th of June 1772 of a brain hemorrhage. He was better known as Jack the Bachelor. He was called Jack the Bachelor because even though he had many lady friends and a family as well, he never went through a form of marriage with any of these people. But of course this wasn't the only reason he was famous. There's a lot of people get up to that. And he used to sail across to the Isle of Man, across the Irish Sea over there, and get tobacco, alcohol and various goods that were highly taxed here, and he used to bring them into Rogerstown estuary, into the harbour there, and from there they were distributed all over the area of North County Dublin. He became a rich man, and he built a magnificent house which still exists. It's on the main street in Rush, and it's a thatched house, a two-storey thatched house, one of the very few that still exist in Ireland. This man was a sort of a Robin Hood figure. He used to give money to poor people and people in need, and for this reason the people in the town used to cover up for him, and he used to hide in their houses when the revenue men came looking for him. In those days, of course, there were very, very rich people, the haves, and the poor people, the have-nots. And he was one of the men who tried to square the things and make things a little bit more equal for the poor people. And for that reason, he's known in Rush and remembered fondly as one of the most famous forebears. That's Jack Connor, or Jack the Bachelor. This stone in Kanuha graveyard appears to be very old indeed, and it appears to have been homemade, chiselled out by the relatives of the man who died. The name on it is John Ryan, died the 14th day of February in the year of our Lord 1713. Luke Ryan was what nowadays we would call a pirate. In those days they used to call them privateers. Now, a privateer was a pirate who was licensed by the government to rob other ships once they weren't British ships. So he could attack French and Spanish ships with impunity because they were sort of always on and off war with the British, and steal their goods. And this fellow Luke Ryan, who came from this area here, from the Loch Shinny area, used to attack ships all along the Irish Sea and in the North Sea. And in common with many of the people today with their Ansbacher accounts, he had his own special little Ansbacher account, except he had it in the town of Roscoff in Brittany. And strangely, Roscoff is almost like a twin of Rush insofar as it's the place where most of the vegetables in France are grown. It's a market gardening area just like Rush. Whether this is the reason he was attracted to Roscoff, I don't know. But he put all his money in the bank in Roscoff. In those days, of course, you didn't deal with pound notes. There was no printed money. It was all gold pieces. When Luke Ryan was finally captured and died, I don't think he was executed, but I know that the government was trying to get its hands on his money. They never did, and he died leaving £10,000 or guineas, which in today's money is something worth like 50 million euros, in the bank in Roscoff. That money's still in the bank in Roscoff, gaining interest all the time. So if you happen to be a relative of this man, Luke Ryan, or you believe you are closely related to him, it's possible you have a chance. You nip into Roscoff next time, into the bank there, and ask them, could you have a look in the account, and maybe if there's anything for yourself, you might get lucky.